So, day 2 of creation is, for me, one of the more interesting days in the creation account. Not because it's any less spectacular. I would say day 1, where God creates the entire universe and everything in it, it's probably the most spectacular, the most awe-inspiring to think about. But day 2 is interesting because it describes a world that is different than what we see today. And so let me read the creation account of day 2. It says, starting in Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, it says, "Then God said, 'Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, a second day." So we read here that there is an expanse between the waters below and the waters above. What this describes is not waters the way we see them today, where we have vast oceans that cover 2/3 of our earth. There were bodies of water, but they would have been smaller. What we see when he says, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters," God separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. So let me start with the waters above the expanse. There was an expanse, a gap between these two waters. The waters above the expanse were probably a canopy of water vapor around the earth, either in our atmosphere, which I don't think that was the case, or it could have been in outer space. Either way, this would have created a uniform climate throughout the world. There wouldn't have been the wind currents that we see today, the same types of wind currents, and it probably would have filtered out a lot of the ultraviolet rays. It could explain why people lived so long, right? Adam lived over 900 years, Methuselah 930 something years. That could explain it. The waters below the expanse, there were some, like I said, some bodies of water. You would have seen seas and lakes and smaller bodies of water than we see today, but most of the water would have been subterranean. It would have been under the ground. Now, how do we know that? Well, first of all, the passage we just read talks about waters below the expanse, but in the account of the flood, if you skip to Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, it says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened." Here he's talking about these two waters separated by the expanse, the fountains of the great deep and the floodgates of the sky were opened. These two waters were the source of the rain that flooded the earth in Genesis chapter 7. You would have had huge fountains of water sprouting out like volcanoes, or like huge super volcanoes, sprouting out into the atmosphere and then pouring down on the earth. And that would have been where most of the water would have come from. A lot of it would have come from the canopy around the earth of water vapor, but most of it would have come from the subterranean water. This subterranean water would have fed the plants that God creates later in the creation account. The ground would have been saturated with water, and that would have fed the plants. We would not have seen rain like we do now. There would not have been the types of rivers we see that usually are a result of melting snow. The river that's described in the Garden of Eden would have probably been a spring that came up from the ground and then flowed down as like a river. But it would have been a very different world than what we see today. And that would have remained, it would have remained that way until the flood. When the flood came, Noah was told to build an ark. The Lord told him to build this massive boat. Told him that the rains were coming. And when Noah would have preached this, and he would have been preaching righteousness, but he would have also been preaching, it's going to rain, it's going to flood, and these people would never have seen rain, and they would have thought he was crazy. So that's day 2 of creation. I hope you enjoy your day. I hope you maybe will read the creation account now with maybe a new pair of eyes. And we'll look at day 3 next time.